Biomed Nexus Daily Updates, your essential biotech, medtech, and pharma recap. No noise, just what matters. TLDR Lilly reported 23 billion in second quarter revenue. Shares rose nearly 5% to $11.70 in pre-market trading, and its market cap stood at $1. So $2 trillion at the end of July. Amgen discontinued its Phase 1 obesity candidate AMG 513, leaving maritide as its only weight loss asset. Executives said future business development will target earlier stage opportunities. Novo's CEO told analysts that failure is par for the course in drug development after a quarter of setbacks. The FDA accepted Merck's filing to expand its RSV antibody Influenza to children under 2 through a second RSV season. AstraZeneca and CSPC signed a joint venture to build a biologics manufacturing plant in Shijiazhuang, China. Altimmune's pemvidutide showed a highly statistically significant effect in alcohol use disorder. Executive takeaway: we asked Monday whether anyone can dent Lilly's obesity lead. Friday answered it, and the answer arrived in a single day's news from 3 companies. Lilly posted a 23B quarter with a market cap over $1 trillion. Amgen discontinued an obesity candidate and is down to one weight loss asset. And Novo's chief executive spent his earnings call explaining that failure is normal in this business. That is not a race tightening. That is one company compounding while the others retrench and reframe. The important detail is Amgen's, though. Its executives said future business development will focus on earlier stage opportunities, which is a quiet admission that the current generation is lost and the only way in is to buy into the next one. That has been our read for months, and now a competitor has said it out loud. The threat to Lilly does not come from maritide or CagriSema. It comes from mechanisms that are still in early trials, which is exactly where Amgen just said it is going shopping. Read full analysis. Obesity, Lilly's quarter made the gap look structural rather than competitive. LLY Lilly reported 23 Bs in second quarter revenue, with shares up nearly 5% to $1,170 pre-market and a market cap of $1. So $2 trillion at the end of July. The scale matters because it is what funds the acquisition program we have tracked all year, 11 company purchases plus licensing deals on top. The revenue buys the pipeline and the pipeline protects the revenue. Amgen cut an obesity drug and told everyone where it is shopping next. Amgen discontinued Phase 1 candidate AMG 513, leaving maritide as its sole weight loss asset. Executives said the late-stage pipeline is largely full and that future business development will focus on earlier stage opportunities. Read that as a strategic concession. Amgen is not trying to outcompete Lilly on the current generation. It is looking past it. Novo's CEO reframed a hard quarter as the normal cost of doing business. NVO CEO Mike Doustar told analysts on the second quarter call that failure is par for the course in drug development, following the ziltivekimab cardiovascular miss, the CagriSema delay, and the Wegovy pill stumble. He is not wrong on the merits, and it is a fair thing for a CEO to say, but it is also the language of a company managing expectations rather than setting them, which is the clearest measure of how the year has gone. Separately, the District Court of The Hague granted Novo a preliminary injunction ordering Ziekenhuis Pharmacy to stop selling a compounded semaglutide nasal spray that infringes Novo's intellectual property. Vaccines and infectious disease Merck moved to widen its RSV antibody to a second season. MRK, the FDA accepted Merck's supplemental filing for Influenza, clesrovimab, seeking to cover children under 2 at increased risk of severe RSV disease through their second RSV season. Most RSV protection targets infants in their first year, so extending into a second season addresses genuinely vulnerable children who currently age out of protection. Elsewhere, Gilead reported HIV as its strongest franchise in the quarter, while building its pipeline into inflammation and oncology, continuing the diversification push we have followed since its deal-making picked up. China AstraZeneca deepened its China footprint again, this time in bricks and mortar. AZN, CSPC AstraZeneca, and CSPC Pharmaceutical signed a joint venture contract to build a new generation biologics manufacturing facility in Shijiazhuang. It extends a partnership that already produced the $1.77b renal collaboration in July, and it is the fifth or sixth AstraZeneca China move we have covered this year. Note the form. Previous deals bought molecules. This one builds a plant, which is a longer commitment and harder to unwind than a licensing agreement. AstraZeneca is not hedging its China exposure, while the Biotech Investment National Security Act sits in committee. It is increasing it. Neuroscience Biogen validated the Tau theory and still will not bet the company on it. BIIB Biogen is treating diranersen as a high-risk, high-reward project with a potential major payout around 2030, with CEO Chris Viehbacher declining to bet the store on it despite the Tau validation we covered at the Alzheimer's conference in July. That is the right posture. The biomarker win was real and the clinical case is still unproven, and a 2030 payout horizon is an honest framing of how long this takes. MapLight hit its endpoint, and analysts shrugged. MapLight's oral schizophrenia candidate reached the main endpoint of a Phase 2 trial, but analysts said BMS's Cobenfy is likely to hold its market share. Hitting an endpoint is not the same as displacing an entrenched drug, and in CNS the commercial bar is often higher than the clinical one. Addiction, the GLP-1 drinking signal, got stronger. Altoltimune said pemvidutide showed a highly statistically significant treatment effect in alcohol use disorder, firming up the mid-stage signal we led with on July 30th. It is now competing with Lilly and newcomer baseline therapeutics in the space. The frontier we have tracked from obesity into MASH, sleep apnea, and now addiction keeps widening, and the field is getting crowded fast. Quick hits. Sarepta faces several make-or-break moments as Michael Severino takes over as CEO, a leadership reset arriving at a decisive stretch for the Duchenne gene therapy company. Mironid raised a $46 Series B for small molecules targeting autosomal dominant polycystic kidney disease, a common inherited kidney disorder with limited options. Marengo nominated its first development candidate under its TriStar collaboration with Ipsen and appointed Sasso Tversky to head immunology. Actemed regained global rights to S-oxprenolol from Faraday Pharmaceuticals. Biospace launched an IPO dashboard to track the 2026 class, which is on pace for the strongest year since 2021. In today's full analysis, be sure to read the full article for all the details, including Lilly's three-tier obesity portfolio broken down by format and efficacy, the complete obesity challenger scorecard, company by company, AstraZeneca's 2026 China deal timeline, where GLP-1 drugs are expanding next, from MASH to addiction. Read full analysis, the week in review. Monday, Roche axed a drug that worked to focus on obesity. We set the week's question on Lilly's challengers. Tuesday, the FT reported AstraZeneca and BMS merger talks. Novo's heart drug failed, and Lilly set a retatrutide filing date. Wednesday, Supernus and Indivior merged in CNS. Analysts called the mega merger unlikely. Thursday, Replimune won its AdCom despite hostile FDA reviews, while Capricor lost. The merger talk was denied. Friday, Lilly posted a $1 trillion quarter, Amgen cut an obesity drug, and Novo's CEO called failure normal. Biomed, Nexus. Pro, Institutional Intelligence. Brief, why Lilly's lead is systemic. The temptation with Lilly is to explain the lead through efficacy. That tirzepatide and retatrutide simply produce more weight loss than the alternatives. That is true, and it is not the durable part. Efficacy advantages get matched eventually because the science is public and competitors are capable. What is harder to match is the system, the efficacy funds. Here is the loop. The GLP-1 franchise generates enormous revenue, a 23B quarter, against a market capitalization over $1 trillion. That revenue funds an acquisition program without precedent, 11 company purchases this year, plus licensing deals across obesity, oncology, cell and gene therapy, vaccines, pain, and psychedelics. Those acquisitions build the pipeline that extends the franchise into the next decade, and the franchise keeps growing fast enough that the deal spending barely registers as strain on the income statement. Each element reinforces the others. A competitor trying to break in has to beat the current drugs, which is hard, while also matching a balance sheet that lets Lilly buy whatever emerges, which is harder. When Amgen says its future business development will focus on earlier stage opportunities, it is acknowledging exactly this. You cannot outbid Lilly for the de-risked asset. You have to find the thing before Lilly wants it. What would actually break the loop? First, a manufacturing or supply failure that caps revenue growth independent of demand, which is the operational risk the tariff environment now makes slightly more real. Second, a pricing shock, whether from Medicare negotiation, the most favored nation agreements, or payer pushback, that compresses the margins funding the deals. Third, and most likely on a long horizon, a next-generation mechanism that makes the current portfolio look dated before Lilly can acquire or replicate it. That is the one to watch, and it is why we keep pointing at the RNA interference and amylin programs rather than at maritide or CagriSema. The threat to a system this well constructed does not come from a competing product. It comes from a change in what the product needs to be. Amgen just told you where the money goes. Next, Amgen discontinuing AMG 513 and stating that future business development will focus on earlier stage opportunities is the most strategically informative sentence of the week, and it deserves more attention than the drug cut itself. Read what it concedes. Amgen has maritide, a serious asset, and a late-stage pipeline it describes as largely full. It is not short of programs. What it is short of is a path to compete in obesity's current generation, where Lilly's portfolio spans oral and injectable, moderate, and maximum efficacy, with retatrutide filing in early 2027. Buying a late-stage obesity asset now would mean paying a premium for something that still loses to tirzepatide. So Amgen is redirecting toward earlier stage where the price is lower and the mechanism might be genuinely different. The market implication is a repricing. If a company of Amgen's size publicly declares that its deal appetite is moving earlier, and if others reach the same conclusion, competition for early-stage metabolic assets intensifies. That runs directly against the barbell we have documented all year, where late-stage assets are flush with capital and early-stage companies struggle to raise. A shift in large-cap business development toward earlier stage would be the correction that barbell needs. And obesity is the logical place for it to start because the commercial prize is large enough to justify the risk. For anyone holding or building early-stage metabolic assets, this is the signal to watch. The buyers are coming earlier. Valuations for differentiated preclinical and phase 1 mechanisms in obesity, particularly novel modalities like RNA interference and amylin approaches, should firm up as more large caps reach Amgen's conclusion. And for the sector generally, it is a small piece of evidence that the early-stage funding drought we keep flagging may find its flaw in the therapeutic areas where the prize is biggest, even while it persists elsewhere. Novo needs a win, not a narrative. Novo's CEO telling analysts that failure is par for the course is defensible, accurate, and exactly the wrong thing to be saying if you want to change the story. He is right on the merits. Drug development fails constantly, and a company running a broad pipeline will absorb losses. Ziltivekimab missing in cardiovascular disease is a normal outcome for an ambitious trial. No serious observer thinks otherwise. The problem is positional. Novo is not being judged on whether it experiences failures. It is being judged against a competitor that, over the same stretch, hit 2 pivotal trials, set a filing date, posted a $1 trillion quarter, and kept acquiring. When the comparison is that stark, explaining that setbacks are normal reads as managing expectations. Leaders set expectations. The company explaining why misses are ordinary is the one behind. What would actually reset the narrative? Not messaging and not litigation against Lilly's advertising, which if anything reinforces the perception that Novo is competing on fronts other than data. It needs CagriSema to deliver unambiguously strong efficacy when the delayed data finally arrive, because that is the asset meant to close the gap on the one metric where Lilly leads. It needs clean execution on the oral obesity opportunity, where the Wegovy pills stumble cost it ground in the market that matters most for the next phase. And it would benefit from a win outside obesity that demonstrates the pipeline has breadth, which is precisely what Ziltivekimab was supposed to provide. The honest assessment. Novo remains a formidable company with an enormous, durable semaglutide franchise, deep prescriber relationships, and real scientific capability. It is not in decline, but it has now strung together enough setbacks that each new one lands as confirmation rather than noise. And that is the dangerous phase, because perception starts to affect talent, partnerships, and the terms on which it can compete for assets. The window to change the story is open, but not indefinite. Watch the CagriSema data, whenever it arrives, as the single most important event on Novo's calendar. Catalyst calendar date event tickers. August 2026 Replimune RP1 FDA response after positive AdCom Replaugust 22 Capricorn Duramio cell PDUFA after negative AdCom Capriminent Moderna mRNA flu FDA decision mRNA imminent revolution. Medicines CNPV filing RVM deminent Lilly. Foundayo T2D filing under CNPV LLY delayed BMS. Cobenfy Alzheimer's psychosis. Readout BMY delayed Novo. CagriSema phase 3. Data NVO ongoing biotech investment. National Security Act awaits committee vote multiple 2026 Neladalkib FDA decision. ALK NSCLC GSKH2 2026 Arrowhead ARO in HBE and ARO ALK7 obesity readouts, RWRQ3, 2026 Revolution, Daraxon Racib approval projected, Truist, RVMDQ3, 2026 Unicuri, Huntington's gene therapy under review Q3, 2026 Regan XBO, Duchenne gene therapy, BLA filing RGNXQ3, 2026 ABVIE, APOG, Vertex, Crinetics, Ipsen, deals, close expected multiple Q3, 2026 Merck, KJA Biotechna close expected MKKGY Sept, 19 Ultragenyx UX111 PDUFA, Sanfilippo Type A, Rarecept 29 Section 232 Pharma tariffs effective, all others, multiple Sept OCT Celldex Barzolvolimab, Phase 3 Chronic Hives, Data CLD Xenov 14 Summit, Ivonescimab FDA decision, NSCLC SMMT Novi 30 Vertex, Povetacicept PDUFA, IgA Nephropathy, VRTX DXC 2026, Minerales Lorundrostat, PDFM LISDX 7 Lilly, Investment Community Meeting LLY Q1 2027 Retatrutide, Regulatory Filing LLY 2027 Retatrutide, Launch Anticipated LLY 2028 Generic Drug, Tariffs begin phasing up multiple, Lilly posted a $1 trillion quarter, Amgen cut an obesity drug and said it is shopping earlier, and Novo's CEO called failure normal. The race we asked about Monday has an answer. Have a good weekend. What are you watching? Reply to this email. Visit the Pro Hub Read. Full article sponsorship slots for 2026 are limited. See packages and pricing.